The dust from the cattle drive still clung to Ryder Yates's clothes when he walked through the doors of the community hall that Saturday evening in September 1878, his boots echoing against the wooden floorboards as fiddle music swirled through the air like smoke. He had spent 3 months on the trail driving longhorns from Texas to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and every muscle in his body ached for rest. But his younger brother had insisted he come to the social, claiming Ryder needed to remember what civilization felt like after so long under open skies. The hall blazed with lamplight, and couples spun across the floor in practiced patterns while others lined the walls, laughing and talking in clusters that reminded Ryder just how long he had been away from proper society. He spotted his brother Thomas near the refreshment table, chatting with a group of young ranch hands, and made his way over, nodding to familiar faces as he passed. The music was lively, some tune he half remembered from before the drive, and the energy in the room felt almost frantic compared to the slow, steady rhythm of life on the trail. Thomas caught sight of him and waved enthusiastically, nearly spilling his cup of punch in his excitement. "You actually came," Thomas said, grinning wide. "I half expected you to fall asleep in the bath and miss the whole thing." "Nearly did," Ryder admitted, accepting the cup his brother offered. The punch was sweet and cold, a welcome relief after months of bitter coffee and warm canteen water. "But you were right. Feels strange being around this many people who are not trying to keep cattle from stampeding." Thomas laughed and gestured around the room. "Half the town is here tonight. The Johnsons organized it to celebrate the harvest. You remember Victoria Winters, do not you? She moved to town about 6 months ago with her aunt after her parents passed. She is the one standing by herself near the far wall, in the blue dress." Ryder followed his brother's gaze and saw her immediately. She stood apart from the other young women who clustered in groups, her posture straight but somehow defensive, as though she had built an invisible wall around herself. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style, and her blue dress, while well made, lacked the ribbons and frills that adorned the other women's attire. She watched the dancers with an expression that seemed equal parts longing and resignation, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "She always stands alone like that?" Ryder asked, something about her solitary figure stirring his curiosity. "Usually," Thomas said quietly. "People have tried to include her, but she keeps to herself. I heard she does not dance. Some folks think she is just standoffish, but I think maybe she is just shy or something. Her aunt, Mrs. Helen Whitmore, runs the boarding house on 3rd Street. Nice woman, but Victoria, she seems sad somehow." Ryder studied Victoria from across the room, noting the way her eyes tracked the dancers with a mixture of yearning and what might have been fear. There was something in her isolation that resonated with him, perhaps because he understood what it felt like to be separate from the crowd, watching life happen around you rather than participating in it. He had spent so much time alone with cattle and sky that he sometimes forgot how to be part of the world other people inhabited. The current dance ended, and couples broke apart, laughing and fanning themselves as the musicians took a brief break. Ryder watched as 2 young men approached Victoria, clearly intending to ask her to dance. She shook her head quickly, her expression becoming almost panicked, and they retreated, shrugging as they moved on to more willing partners. The rejection seemed to make her shoulders slump slightly, as though she regretted the necessity of it. "I am going to talk to her," Ryder said suddenly, setting down his cup. Thomas raised his eyebrows. "You, the man who just spent 3 months avoiding human conversation." "Maybe that is exactly why I should," Ryder replied, already moving across the room before he could second-guess himself. Victoria did not notice him approaching until he was nearly beside her, and when she looked up, Her eyes widened slightly. They were gray, he noted, the color of storm clouds, and held a wariness that made him wonder what had put it there. "Evening, miss," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "I am Ryder Yates. I do not believe we have met." "Victoria Winters," she replied, her voice soft but clear. She did not offer her hand, and he did not push. "You are Thomas's brother. He mentioned you were due back from the cattle drive." "Got in this morning," Ryder said, still getting used to being surrounded by walls again. He gestured to the dancers as the music started up once more. "This is quite a change from campfires and coyotes." A small smile touched her lips, so brief he almost missed it. "I imagine it would be." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the dancers. Ryder noticed how her fingers tapped against her skirt in time with the music, an unconscious movement that betrayed her connection to the rhythm even as she stood apart from it. "Would you like to dance?" he asked, the question emerging more abruptly than he had intended. Victoria's expression shifted immediately, the brief warmth disappearing behind a wall of something that looked like shame mixed with defiance. "I cannot dance," she said firmly, as though the statement was a fact she had accepted long ago. Ryder tilted his head, considering her. "Cannot or will not, cannot," she repeated, and there was pain in the word now. "I never learned properly. My mother was supposed to teach me, but she got sick when I was young, and after that, there was never time or opportunity. When I try, I just make a fool of myself. My feet do not seem to understand what they are supposed to do." The vulnerability in her admission caught him off guard. This was not mere shyness or a simple preference to remain on the sidelines. This was genuine distress, the kind that came from wanting something desperately but believing it forever out of reach. Ryder extended his hand to her anyway, a smile pulling at his lips. "Then let's invent our own steps together," he said. "I spent 3 months walking the same direction as 1,000 cattle. I think I can manage to walk in circles with you, whether we follow the regular pattern or not." Victoria stared at his hand as though it were something dangerous and miraculous at once. "You do not understand. I truly cannot. I have tried before, and I just end up stepping on people's feet and going the wrong direction. It is humiliating." "Then we will go slow," Ryder said, his hand still extended. "And if you step on my feet, well, they have been stepped on by cattle. I think I will survive a lady in dancing slippers. No one has to see us fail but each other, and I promise I will not tell a soul if you do not." She looked up at him then, really looked at him, and he saw the conflict in her eyes. Part of her wanted to accept, to take the risk, but fear held her back like a physical force. He understood that fear, had felt it himself when facing things that seemed beyond his capability. But he had also learned that sometimes the only way past fear was straight through it. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why would you want to dance with someone who cannot?" "Because you are the only person in this room who looks like they actually want to be dancing instead of just going through the motions," Ryder said honestly. "And because I think maybe you need someone to invent new steps with just as much as I do." Victoria drew in a breath, and he saw the moment she decided to trust him, even though trust clearly did not come easily to her. She placed her hand in his, and her fingers trembled slightly against his palm. "If I hurt you, do not say I did not warn you," she said, but there was the faintest hint of hope in her voice now. "Fair enough," Ryder said, and led her toward the edge of the dancing area, away from the center where the most skilled couples spun and whirled. He positioned them carefully, placing her right hand in his left and resting his other hand lightly at her waist. She was stiff as a fence post, every muscle tensed with anxiety. The music was a simple waltz, 3 beats that should have been easy to follow, but he could feel her panic rising. "Look at me," he said quietly. "Not at your feet, not at the other dancers. just at me. Victoria raised her eyes to his, and he saw how scared she was. This was more than just fear of dancing poorly. This was fear of failure, of judgment, of being found lacking in some fundamental way. He recognized it because he had carried similar fears himself, the worry that he would never measure up to what was expected of him. "We are not going to think about steps," he told her. "We are just going to move. When I step forward, you step back. When I step to the side, you come with me. Forget about the proper way. We are making our own way." He started to move, keeping his steps small and simple. Victoria stumbled immediately, her foot catching his ankle, and he felt her start to pull away in embarrassment. He held her gently but firmly, not letting her flee. "That is all right," he said. "Try again. Just follow where I lead. Do not think, just feel." They moved again, awkward and halting. She stepped on his foot, just as she had warned she would, and her face flushed red. But Ryder just smiled and kept moving, refusing to let her self-consciousness stop them. Gradually, so slowly he almost did not notice it happening, she began to relax. Her steps became less wooden, more fluid. They were not doing the waltz the way it was supposed to be done, not by a long measure, but they were moving together, finding a rhythm that belonged only to them. "See," he said softly, "we are dancing." "We are doing something," Victoria replied, but there was a smile in her voice now, tentative but real. "I am not certain it qualifies as actual dancing." "Who gets to decide what qualifies?" Ryder asked, spinning her gently. She stumbled again but laughed this time instead of freezing. The sound was like water in the desert, precious and life-giving. "Maybe everyone else has been doing it wrong this whole time, and we just figured out the right way." "You are ridiculous," she said, but she was truly smiling now, her whole face transformed by it. They continued their improvised dance through the remainder of the song and into the next. Other couples swirled around them in proper formation, but Ryder kept his attention focused on Victoria, watching as the fear gradually left her expression, replaced by something that looked like joy. She was not a perfect dancer, not even close, but she was trying, and there was courage in that attempt that he found himself admiring deeply. When the musicians finally took a longer break, they stopped, both slightly breathless. Victoria's hand was still in his, and neither of them seemed in a hurry to break the contact. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That was kind of you, even if we looked foolish." "I was not being kind," Ryder said and meant it. "I was being honest. You wanted to dance, and I wanted to dance with you." Simple as that. A blush colored her cheeks, but she did not look away. "Would you like some punch? I think I need to catch my breath." "I would like that very much," he said. They walked together to the refreshment table, and Ryder noticed how people watched them, curiosity and surprise evident on many faces. Victoria seemed to notice too, and some of her earlier wariness returned, her shoulders tensing slightly. "They are staring," she murmured as he handed her a cup. "Let them," Ryder said. "They are probably just wondering where we learned those impressive moves." She laughed, and the tension eased from her shoulders again. "You really do not care what people think, do you?" "Spent too much time alone to worry about it much," he admitted. When your only company is cattle and stars, you learn that most opinions are not worth the weight you give them. Victoria studied him over the rim of her cup, those storm-gray eyes thoughtful. "That sounds lonely." "Sometimes," Ryder agreed, "but also peaceful. Out there, you do not have to be anything except yourself. No expectations, no judgments, just you and the work." "That sounds nice," Victoria said wistfully. "I came to Cheyenne to live with my aunt after my parents died, and everyone here has ideas about what I should be. How I should act, who I should associate with, what I should want. Sometimes I feel like I am trying to fit into a shape that was not made for me." Ryder nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. My father wanted me to take over his mercantile business. Good, steady work. Respectable. But I could not stand being cooped up inside all day dealing with accounts and inventory. I needed space, needed to move. He never understood why I would choose cattle drives over security. "Is he still in Cheyenne?" Victoria asked. "He passed 2 years ago," Ryder said. "Thomas runs the store now, and he is much better at it than I ever would have been. But I think my father died disappointed in me." Victoria's expression softened with sympathy. "I am sure that is not true." "Maybe not," Ryder allowed, "but it felt true at the time, still does sometimes." They were quiet for a moment, and Ryder realized he had revealed more to this woman he had just met than he had shared with most people he had known for years. There was something about Victoria that invited honesty, perhaps because she seemed to understand what it meant to feel like you did not quite fit in the space the world had assigned you. "Would you like to walk outside?" Victoria asked suddenly. "It is warm in here and I could use some air." "I would," Ryder said, pleased by her suggestion. They made their way out through the side door, emerging into the cool September evening. The sky was clear and vast, scattered with stars that seemed close enough to touch. The music from inside filtered out into the night, muffled but still present, a backdrop to the quiet that settled over them. Victoria walked a few steps away from the building, looking up at the stars. "I forget to look up sometimes," she said softly. "There is always so much to do at the boarding house, so many tasks that need completing. Days blur together." "That is what I missed most on the trail," Ryder said, coming to stand beside her. "Not the work, but the awareness. Out there, you notice everything. The way the light changes as the sun sets, the smell of rain coming from miles away, the sound of the wind through grass. You have to pay attention because your life might depend on it. But it also makes you feel alive in a way that daily routine does not." "You make it sound beautiful," Victoria said. "Parts of it are," Ryder agreed. "Parts are also miserable. Dust storms, stampedes, endless days of nothing but sun and sweat. But even the hard parts feel real, if that makes sense." "It does," Victoria said. She wrapped her arms around herself, not quite shivering but seeking warmth. Without thinking, Ryder shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She looked surprised but smiled her thanks. "Tell me about your parents," he said gently, "if you want to." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, and he thought she might refuse. But then she began to speak, her voice steady despite the emotion beneath it. "They had a farm in Nebraska," she said. "Nothing grand, but it was ours. My father grew wheat and my mother kept chickens and a garden. I was their only child and they loved me fiercely. My mother was going to teach me all the things a young lady should know, including dancing, but she got sick when I was 12. Some kind of fever that never really left. She lingered for 2 years, and during that time, I took over running the household. There was no time for lessons or social graces, just work." She paused, and Ryder waited, giving her space to continue at her own pace. "After she died, my father tried to keep going, but something in him broke. He just gave up, stopped caring about the farm, about anything. He died 6 months later. The doctor said it was his heart, but I think he just did not want to live without her. They sold everything to pay the debts, and I came here to live with Aunt Helen, my mother's sister. She has been kind, but this is her life, not mine. I am grateful, truly, but I feel lost most of the time." "I am sorry," Ryder said, and the words felt inadequate but honest. "That is a lot of loss for one person to carry." "We all carry something," Victoria said, turning to look at him. "What do you carry, Ryder Yates?" The question caught him off guard with its directness. But if she could be honest with him, he could return that trust. "Guilt, mostly," he admitted. "When my father got sick, I was on a drive. I did not make it back before he died." Thomas had to handle everything alone. And before that, we had fought about my choices, about the life I wanted to live. I never got to make peace with him, never got to know if he understood why I had to choose the path I did. That must be hard, Victoria said softly. Some days more than others, Ryder said. But tonight, standing here with you, it feels a little lighter somehow. Victoria smiled, and in the dim light spilling from the hall windows, she looked almost ethereal. I feel the same way. I have not talked to someone like this since I came to Cheyenne. Most people want polite conversation, surface pleasantries. This feels real. Maybe that is because we are both tired of pretending, Ryder suggested. Maybe, Victoria agreed. They stood together in comfortable silence, listening to the music and watching the stars. Ryder felt something shifting inside him, some locked door beginning to open. He had not expected to meet anyone tonight, certainly had not expected to meet someone who seemed to understand the particular loneliness that came from living a life that did not quite fit society's expectations. I leave in 2 weeks, he said suddenly, needing her to know. Another drive, this time to Denver. I will be gone for at least 6 weeks, maybe longer. Victoria's expression flickered with something that might have been disappointment. Oh, but I will be back, Ryder continued quickly. And I would like to see you again before I go if you would want that. I would want that, Victoria said, and the honesty in her voice made his heart skip. Very much. Tomorrow, he asked. I could come by the boarding house. Maybe we could take a walk, talk more. Tomorrow would be lovely, Victoria said, and her smile was radiant. They returned to the hall eventually, but the rest of the evening felt different now. They danced again, their improvised steps becoming slightly more coordinated but no less unique. Victoria laughed more freely, and Ryder found himself unable to stop watching her, memorizing the way her eyes crinkled when she was amused, the way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating on their movements. When the social finally ended and it was time to say goodnight, Ryder walked Victoria and her aunt back to the boarding house. Mrs. Whitmore was a pleasant woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a knowing smile. She tactfully gave them a moment alone on the front porch. "Thank you for tonight," Victoria said. "You gave me something I did not know I needed." "What was that?" Ryder asked. "Hope," she said simply. "And the reminder that it is all right to make your own steps instead of following someone else's pattern." "Keep my jacket," Ryder said impulsively. "Return it tomorrow when I see you." Victoria clutched the jacket closer, and he saw pleasure in her expression. "I will see you tomorrow then." "Tomorrow," he confirmed. He watched her go inside, waiting until the door closed before turning to walk back toward his own lodgings. The night air was crisp and clear, and Ryder felt more awake than he had in months. Something significant had happened tonight, something that felt like the beginning of a story he suddenly very much wanted to read. True to his word, Ryder arrived at the boarding house the next afternoon, freshly bathed and wearing his better shirt. Victoria answered the door herself, his jacket folded neatly over her arm, and her smile when she saw him made the effort worthwhile. "Ready for that walk?" he asked. "Absolutely," she replied. They walked through Cheyenne's streets, which were quiet on this Sunday afternoon. Most folks were either at church or resting at home, giving Ryder and Victoria a welcome privacy. She showed him parts of the town he had never paid much attention to before, small details that revealed her perspective on this place she now called home. "That is where Mrs. Henderson runs her dressmaking business," Victoria said, pointing to a neat shop with lace curtains. "She taught me how to do proper embroidery when I first arrived. I think she felt sorry for me, but I was grateful anyway. It gave me something to focus on besides grief." "You like it, the embroidery?" Ryder asked. Victoria considered the question. I like the precision of it, the way you can create something beautiful from just thread and fabric. But I do not love it, not the way Mrs. Henderson does. For her, it is a passion. For me, it is just a pleasant way to pass time. What do you love? Ryder asked, genuinely curious. Victoria was quiet for a moment, thinking. I love mornings, she said finally. That hour just after dawn when everything is quiet and new. I love the smell of bread baking. I love reading, especially poetry, though I am not very good at understanding all of it. And I love storms. Does that sound strange? Not at all, Ryder said. I love storms too. The way they make everything feel alive and urgent, the smell of rain on dry earth. Yes, exactly that, Victoria said, her face lighting up. Most people just complain about the inconvenience, but I think storms are beautiful. They continued walking, their conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Ryder told her stories from the trail, describing the vast emptiness of the plains, the way buffalo moved like water across the land, the particular quality of silence that existed in the middle of nowhere. Victoria shared her memories of the farm, the things she missed, and the things she was glad to leave behind. I do not miss the endless work, she admitted, but I miss having a place that felt like mine. The boarding house is Aunt Helen's domain. I help, of course, but I am always aware that I am a guest in someone else's life. What would you want if you could have anything? Ryder asked. Victoria thought about it as they walked. Something small, she said eventually. Not a grand house or great wealth. Just a place of my own where I could make my own choices. A garden, maybe, some chickens. A quiet life, but one that belonged to me. That does not sound like too much to ask, Ryder observed. Maybe not, Victoria said, but it feels impossible sometimes. Women do not generally get to just have their own places. We are supposed to go from father's house to husband's house, and I have no prospects for the latter. Why not? Ryder asked, surprised. She was lovely and intelligent. Surely there were men who would be interested. Victoria laughed, but there was bitterness in it. Because I do not fit what men here seem to want. I am too quiet, too serious. I cannot dance. I do not giggle at jokes I do not find funny, and I have no family, money, or connections to offer. I am just Victoria Winters, the orphan girl who lives at the boarding house and keeps to herself. Maybe you have just not met the right person yet, Ryder suggested carefully. Victoria glanced at him, something vulnerable and hopeful in her expression. Maybe. They had reached the edge of town now, where buildings gave way to open land. The mountains rose in the distance, massive and eternal, their peaks still holding snow despite the summer that had just passed. Ryder found himself thinking about how small humans were in comparison, how brief their time on this earth. It made everything seem both more precious and less significant at the same time. I am glad Thomas dragged me to that social, he said after a while. I almost did not go. I am glad you came, Victoria said quietly. Last night was the first time I have felt like myself since coming to Cheyenne. The first time I have felt like maybe I could be happy here. Ryder wanted to reach for her hand but held back, uncertain if the gesture would be welcome. They had only just met, after all, and yet it felt like he had known her much longer. There was an ease between them that he had never experienced with anyone else, a sense of recognition that went beyond simple attraction. These 2 weeks before I leave, he said. I would like to spend as much of them with you as possible if that would be all right. I would like that too, Victoria said. Though I have responsibilities at the boarding house, I cannot just abandon my aunt. Then I will work around your schedule, Ryder said. Whatever time you can spare, I will take. Victoria smiled, and this time Ryder did reach for her hand. She did not pull away. They stood there at the edge of town, hands clasped, looking out at the vast Wyoming landscape, and Ryder felt the future shifting, rearranging itself into a shape he had not imagined before today. The 2 weeks that followed were the fastest and fullest of Ryder's life. He saw Victoria every day, sometimes for just an hour, sometimes for most of the afternoon. They walked through Cheyenne, exploring every corner of the growing town. They talked about everything and nothing, building a foundation of shared thoughts and experiences. Ryder met properly with Mrs. Whitmore, who watched him with shrewd but approving eyes, clearly seeing how her niece bloomed in his presence. "You are good for her," Mrs. Whitmore told him one evening when he came to collect Victoria for a walk. "She has been like a ghost since she arrived, going through the motions but not really living. You have brought something back to life in her." "She has done the same for me," Ryder admitted. Mrs. Whitmore nodded knowingly. "Just do not hurt her. That girl has known enough pain." "I have no intention of causing her any," Ryder promised. On their walks, Ryder and Victoria invented games and rituals that belonged only to them. They would try to spot the most interesting cloud formation, or count how many different birds they could identify by sound alone. Victoria taught Ryder some of the poetry she loved, and he found he enjoyed the rhythm of the words when she spoke them. He taught her some of the songs cowboys sang on night watch, simple melodies that somehow carried the vastness of the open range within them. "I wish I could see it," Victoria said one afternoon as they sat on a hillside overlooking the town. "The trail, the open country, the way you describe it makes it sound like another world." "It is, in many ways," Ryder said. "Harder than most people imagine, but also more beautiful." "Would you ever stop?" Victoria asked. "Give up the drives and settle somewhere?" Ryder considered the question carefully. A month ago, he would have said no without hesitation. The trail was in his blood, the only place he truly felt like himself. But sitting here with Victoria, feeling her warmth beside him, he found his answer was less certain. "Maybe," he said slowly. "If I had a reason to stay in one place, if there was something waiting for me that mattered more than the trail." Victoria turned to look at him, and he saw understanding in her eyes. She knew he was talking about her, about them, about this thing growing between them that neither had named yet but both could feel. "That is a big if," she said softly. "Yes," Ryder agreed. "But not as impossible as it might have seemed a few weeks ago." The night before he was scheduled to leave for Denver, Ryder took Victoria to dinner at Cheyenne's nicest restaurant, a small establishment that served decent steaks and had tablecloths that were actually clean. They sat across from each other in the lamplight, and Ryder memorized everything about her. The way she cut her food into precise pieces, the little furrow that appeared between her eyebrows when she was thinking, the graceful movement of her hands. "I am going to miss you," Victoria said, and there was no artifice in the statement, just honest emotion. "I am going to miss you too," Ryder replied. "More than I thought possible to miss someone I have only known for 2 weeks. It feels longer, does not it?" Victoria said. "Like we have known each other much longer than that." "It does," Ryder agreed. "Victoria, I need to tell you something before I go." She set down her fork, giving him her full attention. "I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you," Ryder said, the words coming easier than he expected. "I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other in the practical sense. But I also know that you matter to me in a way that scares me because I have never let anyone matter this much before." Victoria's eyes were bright, and he thought she might be fighting tears. "I feel the same way. When you leave tomorrow, it is going to hurt, and that terrifies me because I have tried so hard not to care about anything too much since my parents died. Caring means you can lose, and I have lost enough." "I am coming back," Ryder said firmly. 6 weeks, maybe 8 at most. And when I do, I want to keep seeing you. I want to see where this leads." "So do I," Victoria whispered. Ryder reached across the table and took her hand. "Will you wait for me?" "Yes," Victoria said without hesitation. "I will wait." They finished their dinner and Ryder walked her back to the boarding house. On the porch, sheltered from the street by shadows and distance, he pulled her close. It was the first time they had embraced, and Victoria came into his arms as though she belonged there. She was soft and warm, and she smelled like lavender and something uniquely her. "Come back safe," she whispered against his chest. "I will," he promised. "I have something to come back to now." He wanted to kiss her but held back, sensing it was too soon, that Victoria needed more time before she would be ready for that kind of intimacy. So instead, he held her for a long moment, trying to memorize the feeling of her in his arms, before finally forcing himself to let go and say good night. The next morning, Ryder left with the drive crew, a group of 12 men heading south to pick up cattle and bring them north to Denver. The work was familiar, the routine comforting in its predictability. But everything felt different now because he carried Victoria with him in his thoughts. At night, when he stood watch under the vast star-filled sky, he would think about their conversations, about her smile, about the way she had felt in his arms. The other men noticed his distraction and teased him mercilessly, but Ryder did not mind. He was in love, he realized, truly and deeply in love for the first time in his life. The weeks on the trail passed with agonizing slowness. Every day felt like 3, every mile like 10. They encountered the usual challenges: difficult river crossings, a brief stampede triggered by a lightning storm, a few head of cattle lost to illness. But nothing went seriously wrong, and the drive progressed steadily toward its destination. Meanwhile, back in Cheyenne, Victoria counted the days. She threw herself into her work at the boarding house, keeping busy so she would not dwell on Ryder's absence too much. But at night, she would lie in bed and replay their conversations, remembering the warmth of his hand in hers, the way he looked at her as though she was something precious. She wrote him letters even though she had no way to send them, pouring out her thoughts and feelings onto paper just to have some outlet for the emotions that filled her. Mrs. Whitmore watched her niece with understanding and approval. "That young man is good for you," she said one evening as they prepared dinner for the boarders. "I know," Victoria admitted. "I did not expect this, Aunt Helen. I did not expect to feel this way about anyone." "Love is not something you can plan for," Mrs. Whitmore said wisely. "It just happens, and then you have to decide whether to embrace it or run from it." "I am trying to embrace it," Victoria said, "but it is frightening. What if something happens to him out there? What if he changes his mind about me?" "Those are risks everyone takes when they love someone," her aunt replied. "You can protect yourself from potential pain by never caring about anyone, but what kind of life is that? Your parents loved each other deeply, and yes, the pain of losing each other was terrible. But I do not think either of them would have traded the years they had together just to avoid that pain." Victoria nodded, knowing her aunt was right. She had seen the depth of her parents' love, had witnessed how it sustained them even through the hardest times. If she could have even a portion of what they had shared with Ryder, it would be worth the risk. The weeks stretched into a month, then 5 weeks, then 6. Every day, Victoria found herself watching the roads into town, hoping to see the dust cloud that would signal the return of the cattle drive. She knew she was being silly, that Ryder had said 6 to 8 weeks and had not promised anything more specific. But she could not help the anticipation that built with each passing day. It was a bright October afternoon when the drive finally returned. Victoria was hanging laundry in the yard behind the boarding house when she heard the commotion from the street. The sound of many hooves, the shouts of men, the general noise that accompanied a successful cattle drive coming home. Her heart leaped, and she dropped the sheet she had been hanging, racing around to the front of the house without even thinking. The street was full of cattle and cowboys, dust rising in thick clouds as the animals were guided toward the stockyards. Victoria searched the riders desperately, trying to pick Ryder out from the group. And then she saw him, sitting tall on his horse, his hat pulled low against the sun. As though he sensed her watching, he turned his head, and their eyes met across the chaos. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. He said something to the man riding next to him, then turned his horse and headed straight for Victoria. He dismounted while the horse was still moving, his urgency clear, and then he was standing in front of her, dusty and tired and more wonderful than she remembered. "You are back," Victoria said, and her voice broke on the words. "I am back," Ryder confirmed, and then he pulled her into his arms right there in the street where anyone could see. Victoria did not care. She wrapped her arms around him and held on tight, feeling the solid reality of him, breathing in the smell of dust and horse and leather that clung to him. "I missed you so much," she whispered. "I missed you too," Ryder said. "Every single day." They stood like that for a long moment, oblivious to the world moving around them. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria saw that people were watching, including her aunt, who stood on the porch with a knowing smile. But no one seemed scandalized by their display. If anything, most people looked pleased. "I need to help get the cattle settled," Ryder said reluctantly. "But can I see you tonight, after I clean up?" "Yes," Victoria said. "Please." "I will come by around 7, Ryder promised. He seemed reluctant to leave, reaching out to touch her face gently before forcing himself to remount his horse and return to work. Victoria floated through the rest of the afternoon, unable to focus on anything except the knowledge that Ryder was back and she would see him in a few hours. Mrs. Whitmore watched her with amusement, occasionally having to repeat instructions because Victoria's mind was elsewhere. "You should wear your green dress," her aunt suggested as the afternoon wore on. "The one with the nice collar. It brings out the color in your eyes." Victoria blushed but followed the advice. When 7 o'clock came, she was waiting on the porch, dressed in her best, her heart pounding with anticipation. Ryder arrived exactly on time, transformed by a bath and clean clothes. He had even trimmed his beard, and Victoria thought he looked almost unbearably handsome. "You look beautiful," he said when he saw her. "So do you," Victoria replied, then laughed. "Handsome, I mean, you look handsome," Ryder grinned. "I will take beautiful. Come on, I want to show you something." He offered his arm, and Victoria took it, letting him lead her away from the boarding house. They walked through town as evening settled in, the sky turning brilliant shades of orange and pink. Ryder led her to a small rise on the western edge of Cheyenne where they had sat once before. From here, they could see the town spread out below them and the vast Wyoming territory stretching beyond. "I thought about this view constantly while I was gone," Ryder said as they settled onto the grass. "But mostly, I thought about seeing it with you again." "Tell me about the drive," Victoria said. "I want to hear everything." So Ryder told her, describing the journey south into Colorado, the process of gathering the cattle, the drive to Denver. He told her about the men he had worked with, the challenges they had faced, the small victories and frustrations that made up life on the trail. Victoria listened intently, asking questions, laughing at the funnier stories, concerned about the more dangerous moments. "And what were you thinking about besides this view?" she asked when he had finished. "You," Ryder said simply. "I was thinking about you, about us, about what I wanted my life to look like, and I realized something, Victoria. The trail is not enough anymore. It used to be everything I needed, but now it just feels empty without you. I do not want to spend my life moving from place to place, never settling, never building something that lasts. Victoria's breath caught. What are you saying? I am saying I want to stay in Cheyenne, Ryder replied. I am saying I have money saved from years of drives, enough to buy some land, start a ranch. A small operation, nothing grand, but something of my own. And I am saying I want you to be part of that life if you will have me. Ryder, Victoria whispered, and now the tears that had threatened earlier finally fell. I love you, he said, taking her hands in his. I know it has been less than 3 months since we met, but I am certain about this. I love you, Victoria Winters, and I want to build a life with you. I want to give you that garden and those chickens and that place of your own. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to grow old with you. I love you too, Victoria said through her tears. So much it terrifies me. Then be terrified with me, Ryder said, and he was smiling even as his own eyes were bright with emotion. Say yes. Marry me, Victoria. Let's keep inventing our own steps together. Yes, Victoria said, and the word came out as half laugh, half sob. Yes, absolutely yes. Ryder pulled her close and kissed her then. A kiss full of promise and love and hope for the future they would build together. Victoria kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into the embrace, all the love and fear and joy that filled her heart. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and smiling. We should probably tell your aunt, Ryder said eventually. We probably should, Victoria agreed, but neither of them moved. They sat together on the hillside as full darkness fell, wrapped in each other's arms, making plans and dreaming about the future. Mrs. Whitmore was unsurprised when they returned to the boarding house and shared their news. I knew the moment I saw him look at you at that social, she said, embracing them both. When is the wedding? Soon, Ryder said, looking at Victoria for confirmation. As soon as we can arrange it properly. Spring, Victoria suggested. April or May. That gives us time to prepare, and it will be beautiful then. Spring it is, Ryder agreed. The next months were a whirlwind of activity. Ryder found a piece of land 15 miles outside of Cheyenne, 200 acres with a creek running through it and enough grazing land for a good-sized herd. He bought it with the money he had saved, then spent his days working to build a house and outbuildings. Thomas helped, as did several other men from town who had known Ryder for years and were pleased to see him settling down. Victoria visited the land whenever she could, watching the house take shape. It was not large, just 4 rooms and a porch, but it was well built and solid. Ryder consulted her on everything, from the placement of windows to the design of the kitchen, making sure the house reflected what she wanted and needed. This will be your space, he told her. Your domain. I want you to love it. I already love it, Victoria assured him. Because it will be ours. She also spent time preparing her trousseau, making linens and curtains with help from Mrs. Henderson and some of the other women in town. To her surprise, the women of Cheyenne embraced her now that she was engaged, including her in their gatherings and conversations in a way they never had before. Victoria realized that her isolation had been partly self-imposed, built from her own fear and grief. By opening herself to Ryder, she had also opened herself to community. They were married on a perfect April morning in 1879, with the mountains still snow-capped in the distance and wildflowers blooming across the prairie. The ceremony took place in Cheyenne's church, with what seemed like half the town in attendance. Victoria wore a dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Henderson had helped her make, simple but elegant. Ryder wore a new suit, and when he saw Victoria walking toward him, his expression was pure wonder. Thomas stood as best man, and one of the boarding house girls served as Victoria's attendant. The minister spoke about love and commitment and partnership, but Victoria barely heard him. She was too focused on Ryder, on the vows they exchanged, on the moment when he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger and she became his wife. At the reception afterward, held in the same community hall where they had first danced, someone called for the bride and groom to lead a waltz. Victoria felt the old familiar panic rise, but Ryder just smiled and took her hand. "Ready to show them our steps?" he asked. "Always," Victoria replied. They danced their improvised waltz, the one that belonged only to them, and this time Victoria did not stumble even once. She had found her rhythm at last, and it was perfectly matched to his. The other guests joined in eventually, filling the floor with swirling couples, but Victoria only had eyes for her husband. "Thank you," she whispered as they moved together. "For what?" Ryder asked. "For being brave enough to ask someone who could not dance," Victoria said. "For suggesting we invent our own steps. For changing my life." "You changed mine just as much," Ryder replied. "Maybe more." They left the reception as the sun was setting, riding out to their new home in a wagon decorated with ribbons and flowers. The house waited for them, small but perfect, with smoke rising from the chimney because Thomas had gone ahead to light a fire in the stove. Inside, everything was clean and ready, the furniture in place, the curtains Victoria had made hanging in the windows. "Welcome home, Mrs. Yates," Ryder said, lifting her over the threshold. "Mrs. Yates," Victoria repeated, testing out the name. "I like the sound of that." That first night in their home was everything Victoria had hoped for. Ryder was gentle and patient, attuned to her nervousness and uncertainty. They learned each other slowly, discovering the language of intimacy that belonged only to them, just as they had discovered their own dance. Afterward, lying in their bed with Ryder's arms around her, Victoria felt a completeness she had never known before. This was what she had been missing all these years, not just love, but belonging. A place and a person where she could be fully herself. The first year of their marriage was hard work, but deeply happy. They built their ranch together, starting with a small herd of cattle that Ryder bought with the last of his savings. Victoria established her garden, planting vegetables and herbs and flowers. She got her chickens, 6 hens that provided eggs and endless entertainment. They worked from dawn until dusk most days, but the work felt meaningful because it was building something that belonged to them. Neighbors were few but friendly. The nearest ranch was 5 miles away, owned by a family named the Greens who had 3 children and welcomed the addition of the Yates to the area. Mrs. Green, Sarah, became a good friend to Victoria, teaching her skills she had never learned, like how to preserve food for winter and how to doctor sick cattle. Ryder proved to be a capable rancher, applying the knowledge he had gained from years on the trail to building his own operation. He was fair but firm with the 2 ranch hands he eventually hired, and he had a gift for working with horses that made training new mounts almost effortless. Victoria watched him with pride, seeing how he had found his place at last, how this life suited him in a way the endless movement of cattle drives never had. "Do you miss it?" she asked him one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "The trail." Ryder considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss the openness of it, the simplicity, but I do not miss the loneliness and I do not miss having no place to call home. This is better, Victoria, so much better." "I am glad," she said, leaning against his shoulder. In the spring of 1880, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. Victoria was scared because she had no mother to guide her through this experience, no one to tell her what was normal and what was cause for concern. But Mrs. Green and Mrs. Whitmore, who visited often, stepped into that role, offering advice and reassurance. Ryder was alternately thrilled and terrified. He hovered over Victoria constantly, worried about her doing too much, insisting she rest more than she felt necessary. But his concern came from love, and Victoria found it endearing rather than annoying. "I am not fragile," she reminded him gently when he tried to stop her from working in the garden. "I know," Ryder said, "but you are precious, and I cannot help wanting to protect you." "Then protect me by letting me live normally," Victoria replied. "I will tell you if I need to rest." Their son was born on a cold December morning, arriving 3 weeks earlier than expected but healthy and strong. The birth was difficult, hours of pain that left Victoria exhausted, but the moment they placed the baby in her arms, she forgot everything else. He was perfect, with dark hair like hers and Ryder's strong features already visible in his tiny face. "What should we name him?" Victoria asked, looking up at Ryder, who stood beside the bed with tears streaming down his face. "I was thinking William," Ryder said. "After your father." Victoria's eyes filled with tears at the thoughtfulness of the suggestion. "William Yates, that is perfect." Little William, who they called Will, transformed their lives completely. The ranch work continued, but now it was punctuated by feedings and diaper changes, and the small miracle of watching a new person grow. Will was a good baby, crying only when he needed something, and he seemed to thrive in the open air and space of the ranch. As Will grew, Victoria and Ryder's love deepened into something even more profound than what they had started with. They were partners in every sense, sharing the work and the joy and the challenges of building their life together. They still danced sometimes in their kitchen when the mood struck, improvising steps that now had to accommodate a toddler clinging to his father's leg or riding on his mother's hip. 2 years after Will's birth, Victoria became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their second son, James, arrived in the summer of 1883, a sunny-tempered baby who smiled at everything and everyone. With 2 children, the house felt full and alive, echoing with laughter and the constant motion of small bodies. The ranch prospered as well. Ryder's herd grew steadily, and he developed a reputation for having quality cattle. He expanded their land holdings slightly, buying an adjacent 50 acres when the opportunity arose. They built a new barn and added rooms onto the house, creating space for their growing family. In the evenings, after the children were asleep, Ryder and Victoria would sit on their porch and talk about their days, sharing the small triumphs and frustrations that made up their lives. These conversations were Victoria's favorite part of each day, these moments of quiet connection with the man she loved. "You remember that first night at the social?" Ryder asked one evening. "When you told me you could not dance?" "I remember being terrified," Victoria said. "And amazed that you asked anyway." "Best decision I ever made," Ryder replied. "Asking you to dance." "Best decision I ever made was saying yes," Victoria said. "Well, saying I could not dance and then saying yes when you suggested we invent our own steps." "We have done that pretty well, I think," Ryder observed, gesturing to the ranch, to the house, to everything they had built. "All of this is our own dance, our own steps." "Yes," Victoria agreed, taking his hand, "and I would not change a single movement." When Will was 6 and James was 3, Victoria gave birth to their third child, a daughter they named Lily. She had Victoria's gray eyes and Ryder's stubborn determination, and from the moment she could walk, she was following her father around the ranch, wanting to do everything he did. Ryder adored all his children, But there was something special about his relationship with Lily, the way she looked at him as though he had hung the moon personally for her benefit. The years passed in the way years do when life is full and mostly happy. There were challenges, of course. Hard winters that tested their endurance, a drought one summer that nearly broke them financially, the death of Mrs. Whitmore when Victoria was 31 that left a hole in her heart. But through everything, she and Ryder faced the world together, their partnership unshakable. Will grew into a tall, serious young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. James was more scholarly, preferring books to cattle, and Ryder supported his desire to pursue education even though it meant he would likely leave the ranch eventually. Lily was wild and free, more comfortable on horseback than in a parlor, and Victoria saw so much of herself in her daughter, the girl she might have been if circumstances had been different. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Ryder surprised Victoria by arranging for the children to stay with the Greens so he could take her into Cheyenne for the night. They stayed at the boarding house, which was now run by one of Mrs. Whitmore's friends since the estate had passed to Victoria, who had no desire to leave the ranch to manage it. That evening they went to the community hall, where another social was being held. The hall looked much the same as it had 2 decades earlier, though many of the faces had changed. Ryder led Victoria onto the dance floor and they moved together with the ease of long practice, their steps perfectly matched. Still inventing our own dance, Ryder murmured in her ear. Always, Victoria replied. Later, as they walked through Cheyenne streets, Victoria marveled at how much had changed. The town had grown significantly, with electric lights now brightening some of the main streets and new businesses opening constantly. The wild frontier that Ryder had known as a young man was slowly being tamed, becoming civilized. "You miss the old days?" Victoria asked. "When things were rougher, less settled, sometimes," Ryder admitted, "but I do not miss who I was then." "I was lonely, Victoria, even though I did not fully realize it at the time. I was moving constantly because I did not know how to stand still. You taught me that standing still, being rooted in one place with one person, is not the trap I thought it was. It is freedom in a different way." "You taught me something too," Victoria said. "You taught me that it is all right to be afraid and do the thing anyway, that making mistakes while trying is better than never trying at all. I was so scared that night you asked me to dance, but you made it safe to fail, and that changed everything." They stood on the hillside where Ryder had proposed, looking out at the lights of Cheyenne below. The town seemed to glow in the darkness, a beacon of human persistence and hope. Beyond it, the vast Wyoming territory stretched away into shadow, still wild in places, still untamed. "If you could go back and tell that scared girl at the social one thing, what would it be?" Ryder asked. Victoria thought about it. "I would tell her that the cowboy who asks her to dance will change her life in the best possible ways. That 20 years from now, she will be standing here with him, happy and loved and exactly where she is supposed to be. I would tell her to be brave, that it is worth the risk." "What would you tell the dusty cowboy who almost did not go to the social?" Victoria asked. "I would tell him to clean up and go," Ryder said. "Because the quiet woman in the blue dress standing by herself is his future, his home, everything he has been searching for without knowing it. I would tell him that asking her to dance will be the beginning of the best part of his life." They kissed then, a long, sweet kiss that held 2 decades of love and partnership and shared life. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling. "Let's go home," she said. "To our ranch, our children, our life." "Best idea you have had all day," Ryder replied, taking her hand. They walked back through Cheyenne together. Their steps matched perfectly after years of practice, heading home to the life they had built together, one improvised step at a time. The future stretched ahead of them, unknown but not frightening, because they knew they would face it together, inventing their own path just as they always had. Years continued to flow like water, marking their lives with the accumulation of small moments that built into a rich tapestry of shared history. Will married at 24, bringing home a bright young woman named Caroline who fit seamlessly into the ranch life. They built a house on the far corner of the property, and Will took over more of the day-to-day operations, allowing Ryder to step back slightly, though he never fully retired. James, true to his scholarly nature, went east to study law, eventually settling in Denver where he established a successful practice. He visited when he could, usually bringing books for his mother, who had never lost her love of reading. Victoria was proud of him for pursuing his own path, even though she missed having him nearby. Lily shocked everyone by falling in love with a teacher who came to establish Cheyenne's first proper school. Marcus Reynolds was everything the rough ranchers of the area were not: educated, refined, quiet. But he loved Lily fiercely, and more importantly, he understood her wild spirit and never tried to tame it. They married when Lily was 20, and she became involved in education reform, working to ensure children throughout Wyoming had access to learning. Victoria and Ryder became grandparents 5 times over, and their home was often filled with the sound of grandchildren running through rooms, playing in the yard, learning to ride horses the way their parents had. Ryder proved to be an endlessly patient grandfather, teaching little ones to rope fence posts and identify animal tracks, passing on the knowledge he had accumulated over a lifetime. As they moved into their 50s, both Victoria and Ryder were struck by how quickly time had passed. It seemed like only yesterday they had been young, building their ranch from nothing, and now they were watching their grandchildren grow, seeing the legacy they had created extending into another generation. "You have any regrets?" Victoria asked Ryder one evening as they sat on their porch, a ritual they had maintained through all the years of their marriage. She was mending one of the grandchildren's torn shirts, and he was oiling a saddle that had seen better days. Ryder looked up from his work, considering the question seriously. "Not about anything that matters," he said finally. "I wish I had made peace with my father before he died. I wish I had found you sooner, had more years with you, but I do not regret the life we built, the choices we made. Everything brought us here to this, and I would not change that." "Neither would I," Victoria said. "Even the hard parts, the losses and the struggles, they were all part of becoming who we are." "You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," Ryder said, setting aside his work to look at her fully. "More beautiful now than you were at 22. Victoria laughed, touching her face where lines had formed around her eyes and mouth. "Now I know you need spectacles, old man." "I see just fine," Ryder insisted. "I see the woman who said yes when I asked her to dance even though she was terrified. I see the partner who built this ranch with me, who gave me 3 incredible children, who has been my best friend and my love for more than 30 years. That is what I see, and it is beautiful." Victoria set aside her mending and moved to sit beside him on the porch steps. He put his arm around her, and she leaned into his solid warmth, grateful beyond words for this man, this life, this unexpected happiness that had begun with an improvised dance. "Tell me a story," she said, something she often requested in these quiet evening moments. "What kind of story?" Ryder asked. "Tell me about us," Victoria said. "Tell me how we began." So Ryder told her the story she already knew, the one they had lived together. He told her about seeing her standing alone at the social, about deciding to approach her despite his own weariness and uncertainty. He described how she had looked when she said she could not dance, the mixture of shame and longing in her expression. He recounted the moment he suggested they invent their own steps, how her hand had trembled when she placed it in his. Victoria listened as though she were hearing it for the first time, treasuring every detail. When he finished, she added her own version, describing what it had felt like from her perspective. The surprise of being asked, the terror of accepting, the gradual realization that this strange cowboy was somehow seeing the real her beneath all the armor she had built. "We were so young," Victoria marveled, "so uncertain about everything." "But not about each other," Ryder said. "I knew almost immediately that you were special, that you mattered. The rest just built from there." They sat together as darkness fell completely, watching stars emerge one by one in the vast Wyoming sky. The air was cool with the promise of autumn, carrying the scent of sage and grass and home. From inside the house, they could hear Will and Caroline putting their children to bed, the murmur of voices and splash of water in the basin, the timeless sounds of family life continuing. "I am so glad you came to that social," Victoria said quietly. "I am so glad you were brave enough to ask." "I am glad you were brave enough to say yes," Ryder replied. "Even when you thought you could not do it, you tried anyway. That has always been your strength, Victoria. You face your fears." "Only because you made it safe to try," Victoria said. "You showed me that failure was not the end of the world, that we could make mistakes together, and it would be all right." As they aged, their love continued to deepen in ways that surprised them both. The physical passion of youth mellowed into a profound intimacy that encompassed body, mind, and spirit. They knew each other completely now, could anticipate needs and moods, communicate with a glance or a touch. They had been through so much together: births and deaths, prosperity and hardship, joy and sorrow. All of it had woven them together until they were no longer two separate people but a partnership, a unit, an us. The ranch continued to thrive under Will's management. He proved to have a head for business that Ryder had never possessed, expanding their operations carefully and wisely. The Yates Ranch became known throughout Wyoming for quality cattle and horses, and the family name carried weight in ranching circles. When Victoria was 58, she received word that James had been appointed as a judge in Denver, a significant honor that reflected his success and reputation. She and Ryder traveled to attend the ceremony, their first trip away from the ranch in several years. Denver shocked them both with how much it had grown, how urban and bustling it had become. The Wild West they had known in their youth was disappearing, replaced by civilization and progress. "You think that is good or bad?" Victoria asked as they walked through Denver's paved streets, electric lights blazing above them. "Neither, I suppose," Ryder said. "Just different. Every generation sees the world change. Ours is not the first, will not be the last." They were proud of James, watching him take his oath, seeing the respect others showed him. But they were also glad to return to the ranch, to the quiet rhythms they had established, to the life that felt like home in a way no city ever could. Lily gave birth to twin daughters when Victoria was 60, and the news prompted a visit that stretched into a week. The twins, named Grace and Hope, were tiny and perfect, and holding them reminded Victoria so viscerally of holding her own babies that it brought tears to her eyes. "Time is strange," she told Lily as they sat together, each holding a twin. "It feels like yesterday I was where you are, and yet it also feels like a lifetime ago." "Was it hard?" Lily asked. "Raising us, sometimes," Victoria admitted, "but mostly it was wonderful." "Exhausting and wonderful at the same time. You gave my life meaning, you and your brothers. You showed me what I was capable of." "You and Father, you have the best marriage I have ever seen," Lily said. "I hope Marcus and I can have what you have." "Then keep talking to each other," Victoria advised. "Keep being honest about what you need and what you feel. Keep choosing each other, even when it is hard. Your father and I, we have had our difficult moments, times when we did not agree or when life felt overwhelming. But we always came back to the partnership, to the commitment we made. That is what sustains a marriage, the constant choice to keep choosing each other." The years moved into the 1900s, a new century that brought changes none of them could have imagined in their youth. Automobiles began to appear on roads, airplanes took to the sky, and electricity spread even to rural areas. The Yates Ranch modernized slowly, adapting to new technologies while maintaining the core values Ryder and Victoria had established. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary with all their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch. Will and Caroline now had 5 children ranging from newborn to 17. James and his wife Elizabeth had 3, and Lily's twins were joined by 2 more daughters. The house overflowed with family, every room occupied, conversations and laughter filling spaces that were often quiet with just the 2 of them. At the celebration dinner, Will stood to offer a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who showed us all what real love looks like. Who built this ranch from nothing and created a legacy that will last for generations. Who taught us that the best things in life are worth working for, worth fighting for, worth protecting. Thank you for everything you have given us." Victoria felt tears streaming down her face as she looked around the table at all these people, this family they had created. It was more than she had ever dreamed of that long-ago night when a dusty cowboy asked her to dance. It was everything. Ryder squeezed her hand under the table, and when she looked at him, she saw his own eyes were wet. "We did good," he whispered. "We did great," Victoria whispered back. As they moved into their 70s, physical limitations began to assert themselves. Ryder's knees bothered him, making it harder to ride for long hours. Victoria's hands sometimes ached with arthritis, making fine needlework difficult. But they adapted, adjusted, found new ways to contribute and stay engaged with the life of the ranch. Ryder spent more time mentoring his oldest grandson, teaching him the skills and knowledge accumulated over a lifetime. Victoria worked with the younger grandchildren, teaching them to raid and cook and tend gardens. They found joy in these new roles, in being the keepers of family history and tradition. One evening, as they prepared for bed, Ryder turned to Victoria with a thoughtful expression. "Do you remember what you said to me the night I proposed, about wanting something small but your own?" "I remember," Victoria said. "I wanted a garden and chickens and a quiet life." "Did you get what you wanted?" Ryder asked. "Or did I give you too much?" Victoria considered the question seriously. "You gave me exactly what I needed, even though it was not exactly what I thought I wanted. I wanted small because I thought that was all I deserved, all I could handle. But you saw bigger possibilities. You gave me this ranch, this family, this abundant life. And yes, I have my garden and my chickens, but I also have so much more. You did not give me too much, Ryder. You gave me everything." "Good," Ryder said, pulling her close. "Because you gave me everything too. A home, a family, a reason to stay in one place and build something lasting. You gave me love, real love, the kind I did not even know existed before I met you." They held each other in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of their home settling around them. Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered through grass and trees, the eternal song of the high plains. Inside, they were warm and safe, together as they had been for more than 4 decades, together as they would be for whatever time remained. "If I could go back and do it all again," Victoria whispered. "I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," Ryder agreed. "Not one single thing." As Victoria's 80th birthday approached, the family began planning a celebration. But she waved away suggestions of big parties, wanting only her immediate family gathered for a quiet dinner. The truth was, she tired more easily now, and large gatherings exhausted her. On the evening of her birthday, she sat at the head of the table with Ryder beside her, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and even two great-grandchildren now, Will's oldest having started a family of his own. She looked around at all these faces, all these lives that had come into being because she had been brave enough to accept a cowboy's invitation to dance, and she felt overwhelming gratitude. "I want to tell you all something," she said when the meal was finished. The conversations quieted, everyone turning to listen. "When I was 22, I thought my life was over. I had lost my parents, lost my home, lost any sense of who I was or what my future might hold. I came to Cheyenne to live with my aunt, and I was just existing, not really living." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "And then your grandfather asked me to dance. I told him I could not because I truly believed I could not. But he said something that changed my life. He said, 'Then let's invent our own steps together.' Those words gave me permission to be imperfect, to try even though I might fail, to create something new instead of following someone else's pattern." Victoria reached for Ryder's hand. "We have been inventing our own steps together for 58 years now. We built this ranch, raised you children, created this family. We did it our way, not always following convention, not always doing things the way others thought we should. And I want you all to know that this life, this family, is my greatest joy and my proudest accomplishment." There was not a dry eye at the table. Lily came around to hug her mother, followed by her brothers, and then the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, until Victoria was surrounded by love made tangible. That night, lying in bed beside Ryder, Victoria felt a peace so profound it was almost transcendent. She had lived a good life, a full life, a life rich with meaning and connection. Whatever time remained would be bonus, grace notes added to a symphony already complete. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Ryder replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Always have, always will." They drifted off to sleep holding hands the way they had on countless nights before, partners in all things, united until the end. Victoria lived to see her 85th birthday, and Ryder made it to 87. In those final years, they were rarely apart, each knowing instinctively that their time together was precious and finite. When Victoria's health began to fail, Ryder was beside her every moment he could be. And when he followed her 18 months later, the family understood that he had simply been unable to imagine life without her. They were buried side by side on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together, with a simple marker that read, "Ryder Yates and Victoria Yates, partners in all things." The ranch continued under Will's management and eventually passed to his oldest son, the Yates name remaining tied to the land for generations to come. But their true legacy was not the land or the cattle or even the family name. Their legacy was the love they had shared, the partnership they had built, the lesson they had taught through their example. That the best things in life come from being brave enough to try even when you are scared, from inventing your own steps instead of following someone else's pattern, from choosing each other every day through all the years and all the challenges and all the joy. In Cheyenne, old-timers still told the story of the cowboy and the woman who could not dance, who met at a social in 1878 and built a love that lasted a lifetime. Young couples heard the tale and were inspired to be brave in their own relationships, to take risks, to create their own path. The story became legend, and the legend became a testament to the power of love and courage and partnership. And sometimes, on quiet evenings at the ranch, when the wind whispered just right through the grass and the stars blazed overhead in the vast Wyoming sky, people swore they could still feel the presence of Victoria and Ryder, dancing together in the darkness, their steps perfectly matched, their love eternal, inventing new patterns for a dance that would never end. The ranch house stood for over 100 years, sheltering generation after generation of the Yates family. The porch where Victoria and Ryder had spent so many evenings remained, weathered but solid, a symbol of endurance and permanence. Grandchildren told great-grandchildren the story of how it all began, keeping alive the memory of the dusty cowboy who asked a scared young woman to dance, and the magic that unfolded when she said yes. Their story became part of the fabric of Wyoming history, a reminder of the real pioneers, not just those who settled the land, but those who settled into love, who built families and communities, who faced fear and uncertainty with courage and hope. Victoria and Ryder Yates had done all of that and more, leaving behind not just property and descendants, but an example of what it meant to truly live, to truly love, to truly build a life worth remembering. And so their dance continued long after they were gone, in the hearts and lives of everyone who heard their story and was inspired to be brave, to try, to invent their own steps and dance their own dance, together with someone they loved, creating beauty and meaning in a world that desperately needed both.